Well, hey, John, thanks for joining me for this episode of the podcast. I appreciate it. Um, I really want to talk to you about, I don't know if I'll call it State of the Union. I don't want to do an annual review because that is cliche, but it's kind of like that because it's the end of the year. And I'd like to get some words about, what has happened maybe over the obviously over the last 12 months, right? We'll call it 2024, but even maybe a step back, right? 2023. Like, what, in your opinion, like what type of significant advancements have you noticed that were either particularly interesting, you didn't think they were possible, just some tidbits in the past, and then want to go in the future and see where we may go from there.
Yeah. So it would be funny. For years, you and I in other areas have done this year-end thing and then making predictions on the next year. We'd actually be irrelevant unless we did that every month. It really would not. It doesn't actually matter to say what do you predict in the next 12 months because we'll be completely wrong. So I've been tracking OpenAI and other NLP-based AI for quite a while. I've been doing this work myself for quite a while. Started a company years and years ago to deliver on this kind of tech. So it's been even for someone who's tracking and even someone who sees it coming, it's unbelievable. We have conversations today that I think we would not have expected to have in our lifetime in some cases. We've done things and seen things. You now have a mobile app that is AI talking to you in a fluid type of way, playing expert for you on topics that you wish you could learn a lot more about, and you wouldn't have expected that. There's stuff that the Jetsons didn't get right that we're doing today, right? There's a real shocking, and this is not me reporting anything new, right? You guys totally already get that. But how people are seeing that and how the world is reacting to it, I think is actually as much the story as anything. And where that takes us, I think is really, of course, up to us. But I think that there are some typical and natural reactions that I think are worth trying to address. But anyway, I think the future is incredibly bright and there's unbelievable things that we're going to be able to accomplish, and that it all ends up serving humanity, not serving to destroy humanity. So I think we really ought to get, hopefully, maybe that dialogue talked about just a little bit today.
Yeah, the destroy humanity is particularly interesting because that's you hear that. I don't think it's that common, but it sure gets a lot of attention on, AI is going to remove all the jobs, going to take over, it's going to think by itself, and I mean that's just not going to happen anytime soon.
A year and a half ago, a new hire says, "So John, do you ever feel like you're building the bomb?" It's like, what? Yeah, like, is this like the thing that's going to destroy everything? And we're basically empowering us to hit a single button and everything just goes away, and that or another new hire actually, after a dialogue somewhat similar to the one we may end up having now. So does that mean that you're for a universal income for all people? Because I think what you just said is that no one has anything to do because AI does it all. I didn't say anything like that, by the way, right? But that's the natural conclusion people draw. Those are understandable, but I think if we take it in context, we'd realize it really is just a matter of you see first effects, right? So something happens to automate a function that is currently heavy labor burden, and you know that labor burden will be reduced. There's a first effect. You totally see it. What you don't know, and you really can't know because you've got to let it play out, is what are the positive consequences of that happening that are going to actually create demand for labor, for people, and what is going to happen in the world that is going to actually transition us to not people are less relevant, but people are more relevant, or not people are struggling to find meaning, but people actually have much more meaning in the work that they do. So we have the first effect problem that is causing us not to be able to as greatly embrace this as we would want. And it makes, no psychologist, but it makes psychological sense. We just have to recognize that this is a pattern that has repeated itself since, I'm sure, motorized vehicles landed on the same roads, where a bunch of people and an entire economy was oriented around taking care of horses. And it's been, and by the way, that's even recent history compared to the number of, right, technology. The printing press, I'm sure, had a whole lot of people scared who were capable of scribing, right?
Right.
But we have got to recognize that we couldn't stop at one point and say, no, 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 these scribers need work. We better not do that. It boggles the mind to think what the world would have not seen and been able to accomplish, and how good things are. Think about the lifestyle we have relative to those who were back in that day, that is driven by the advancements of technology. And so we have nothing to do but embrace it. Of course, it could all be used poorly. It could all be abused, but it itself is a capability that needs to be leveraged. And in most cases, it's going to be leveraged in dramatically good ways. So we can,
Just, tools like anything else. When you were talking about the scribe, I don't know why, I was thinking about construction or building a house, right? And you wouldn't do that without power tools, but yet the Amish do. And, we think like, why are those guys just not using, modern tools?
Right, right.
They do hand tools, but hey, they're very good craftsmen, which I've heard the analogy of AI being a very good craftsman, right? It can take something that's existing and, learn the pattern and redo it. So I kind of like that analogy too.
Yeah, well, and maybe I'm so close, my nose butts up against the screen at times doing AI work. I actually don't have all that. I'm not all that impressed with AI. I mean, I love the effect. I love what doing things at machine speed instead of the result of tremendous hours of human labor. The ability for us to do things at that speed and at that lower cost, at that level of efficiency, there's incredible gains. But I hope we realize, even in the news press, the press, it's obviously it's easy for the press to need a sensational headline. So when it says something like, AI is discovering cancer in radiology reports better than doctors, well, wait a minute. AI was taught how to identify cancer in radiology reports. It is actually a fallacious statement to say what that news report just said. More correctly would be a bunch of doctors that are rushed, incapable of doing an exhaustive amount of investigation in that radiology report, versus a computer, which can do 100,000 times the amount of investigation in the same amount of clock time, right? So if you give the radiology report to a good old, fashioned, regular old doctor wearing the white coat, and she sits for 5 minutes with that radiology report, and you give an AI model 5 clock minutes with that same radiology report, 1,000,000,000 times more analysis can be done by the machine. All that headline said is that exhaustive investigation with the existing techniques we have is more effective than less exhaustive investigation with the techniques that we have.
Right.
That's in fact all it actually said. So that's the power. Harness it. But this whole idea that it's actually better than people at anything is completely fallacious. It is a diminished, reactive, historic reflection of us. It is not anything. A model is not saying anything that hasn't already been said, one way to put it. And if it is attempting to triangulate and calculate into the future, it is doing that based on the training it was given. Right?
Right.
So, love it. Love what linguistic capabilities NLP provides us. But we got to be really kind of grounded in what we're actually seeing here, right? We produce better cars with more automation and with AI driving so much of the construction process, versus when it was so much tedious human labor and a whole lot fewer backs and arms have been saved by people working in that industry. The quality has gone up. Again, not because machines are capable of a higher level of quality, but they are capable of stronger, more precise, right? There are physical things that I'm actually a huge fan of the robotics and humanoid even based robotics that are on the cusp of really kind of flooding the market and entering every facet of life. I really am, and I think it's fantastic. It'll be another whole huge revelation of the way that the world is changing. They have some capability, physical capabilities that we can't possibly have. But in terms of thinking and doing, what they've got over us, they have over us is speed.
Yeah. Yeah. So in terms of thinking and doing and speed, like what happens with, let's say, software development, right? So if people are trying to use the different AI tools, which is just software, and they have to figure out how to apply it, um, you either have, I mean, the code generators have been around forever, right? Just generating more and more code. Like,
Yeah.
what happens with consuming technology and like maybe software development as a career? Like,
Right.
are those guys going away?
Yeah, well, you'd want to think that if it was a first effects kind of comment, right? When you hear Google, we have the same stat. When you hear the CEO of Google say about 30% of our code is now being is now AI generated, and you think, okay, well, that amounts to a 30% reduction in the requirement for developers. So how many out of work developers are on the street corner looking for a job or starving? None, not a one. In fact, what would happen? The demand for good, talented developers is going up, not down. Why? Because now we can accomplish more with approximately the same amount of human labor, and that has benefit to us, and that is actually driving new things. Do you think that Google wants to write less software next year because they can do it cheaper, or write the same amount of software next year because they could do it for the? No, of course not. They're not going to take the efficiency to the bottom line as cost savings. They're going to take it to the bottom line as additional product revenue by building more things. And in fact, because it's so universally available, I mean that's it's one of the great democratization aspects of AI is language barriers are getting reduced. Well, not say broken completely, but reduced. Access is much higher than it would have been even just 10 years ago. We have a lot of, I mean, I think Starlink covering the entire globe practically with internet coverage and with language translation being so. I mean, just think about the opportunities in the breadth of that. Anyway, the ability for us to do more, better, is causes more to be built. It doesn't cause the same amount to be built cheaper, and therefore we're in a desperate situation. We're actually in a tremendous situation where now more creative thinking creates more creative things, and the creative process is a human process.
No. So if, like, from a cadence perspective, how people are used to operating, and you're talking about we're going to create capacity, so we'll create more things, and the if you remove the menial task of a software developer, obviously they can do more creative work. What do you what do you think the attitude shift from an executive team needs to be
Yeah.
to really understand that, okay, the same amount of work that it took me last year may take me 2 months, a month next year. I don't know. I'm just making the times up, but like it's going to accelerate. So like, where do you think their mindset is, and how do you think like they need to see something in order to realize the acceleration?
Yeah, yeah, and by the way, most tasks are not going to be 90% automation. So if on the whole, it isn't. I wouldn't say a 2025 goal expectation is that, and most jobs are going to be 90% reduced labor, but there are some that are going to be practically completely reduced, not eliminated completely, because in fact, like I said before, AI is a reflection of of us at this moment in time, and it's more of a reactive aspect, right? It's not a forward-looking aspect. So the notion of training and guiding and auditing, if you will, AI is really what those jobs that are most affected by AI are really those people become trainers of AI in essence, and that makes them less likely to be hurt on the job doing those jobs, and less likely to be thinking that I do the same, plug and play, boring task 1,000 times every day. It's going to be a much more challenging and creative job for them, and I think that that'll be a good thing. And yes, it does require fewer of those people to do that than to do the actual job completely. But getting to your house building analogy, if you walked up to any of those folks who were working on that job site, other than the Amish, as you point out, and say, "Hey, I got a great idea. We could hire all your friends that currently don't have work if you guys used those tools instead of the ones you have right now, and you pointed at a whole box of old shovels and picks and hammers and stuff." There's no way, right? No way. And by the way, that whoever's asked for that house to be built couldn't afford the price of the house that would have been built with those tools, with doubling or tripling or quadrupling the number of people and the timeline associated with that would have cost even more in terms of, right? I mean, just the effects. So people own nicer houses because of those tools. They get to move into them much faster, and that has a acceleration of all kinds of things in our economy, blah, blah, blah. Those are the secondary effects of those tools. We get the same thing. When I think about you increase the velocity of development, we're just continuing the same pattern we've been on since Moore's curve was described, right? What we've got to do is we've got to think more about how do I operationalize and create a core competency of adopting technology faster and faster. How do I really make this something that I'm good at? I don't want to be surprised anymore. I want to be ready to take it and use it. I certainly don't want to be the organization that says, I'll get around to it because I may not have much of a customer base or my pricing structure or my ability to produce new products versus competitors may be so severely impacted by that strategy that I fear for those companies that are actually thinking that way. And you know what? We entered 2024 thinking that a third of the market would say what I just said. I think this whole AI thing, I don't know. We're going to let it play out. In a couple of years, we're going to see what's left and we're going to buy then. And we figured there'd be a center, 50% of the market that would be saying, as soon as I get a really solid business case, I'm going. And then of course the top 25% is like, I just got to do stuff because I want to be that first mover and I want to be the one doing the learning, right? So like a typical, adoption curve. We didn't find a bottom third or a bottom 25%. We didn't find it. We thought we would have something like that, but we didn't. By and large, we just don't have it, and of course our business is booming around it, but the reality is that I think has a really interesting effect. The fact that we're actually in a mood, we are going to do this, right? Well, then how is the question?
Yeah.
And we want to be thoughtful about how, because we want to get really good at this. And we want to be able to do this. A really simple example, talked to a customer a couple of weeks ago. They were describing how they went through a really interesting project. They brought on data science skills. They brought in additional development skills. They built a really neat project. They leveraged some LLM technology and of course did a number of other things in order to make something happen. It's great, fantastic. And you did that a really traditional way, right? A very heavy labor, existing tooling, existing kind of way to go about doing it. That's not surprising, right? So I'm not about to say, oh my gosh, how dumb are they? That's what they would know to do.
Well, that's their pattern, right?
Exactly. The question, though, that I ask them is, so is that the only AI you intend to do within your organization? Of course not. We need to do this 50 times. All right. Can you do that 50 times? Can you do what you just did 50 more times? And they literally said, well, yeah, like by 2030 or something, I could do it 50 times.
Yeah.
And because, I mean, the amount of, no, obviously the answer is no. Okay, well, then we've got to find a different, better way of adopting new tech at a velocity that is significantly higher than the way we currently do things, including that very project that they did. And the greatest thing I think that, again, we have to think about when we really internalize, I'm talking right to an executive team. If I'm saying this to an executive team, it's you've got to deliver projects faster and realize that those projects may not survive the end of the year because the tech underneath those projects or the basis of how you built those projects may be fundamentally different literally months after you delivered it. We think of delivering an application and it having a 3, 5, 10 plus year life cycle. Well, the need may be there for the next 10 years. You still need to process orders or support customers or provide logistics to your whatever. But the means by which you do it may be transforming literally within a year. And you've got to keep up. And I don't want that to be a fear. I want that to be an opportunity for you to become a winner in your industry, because those are your two choices. It can either be something that happens to you, and now you got to figure out how to deal with your being disrupted. Or you could be the disruptor who says, I've figured out how I'm going to accomplish the most I possibly can with technology that continues to evolve so quickly that what I was really excited about at the beginning of the year, I'm replacing by the end of the year, and I have found an economic model to do that without it basically taking back all the value, right? The last thing we'd want is IT projects that cost more than they deliver, or you've got to constantly manage them. We've always said this, right? The total cost of ownership of software is 80% in the maintenance. Well, you've got to get really, really good at making that not the case, because you're going to do a lot of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you were talking about teams can't be surprised anymore, and if they are surprised, the bullwhip effect of trying to install something new, right? And you have to be able to do this faster than before. Like more concretely, like what do people need to do? Well, if you say you need to adopt the change, quicker than before, at the same, especially with the whole LLM thing, right? Everyone's like, oh my God, I got to have this, right? And there was a report I read the other day. I'll dig it up and put the link in the article. But it said a lot of these projects were moving from, proof of concept, should I do this, to actual like capital, or operating budgets, right? They're increasing their spend.
Yeah.
And hopefully it's, the majority, right? You said, but we haven't really spotted the bottom 25%, maybe because they're just not raising their hand yet.
Right.
But like, what do you have to do? Like, if you were like starting January 2025, what does the plan look like hypothetically, obviously, and then like, what's the attitude?
Well, we've actually done this now countless times this very year with the very customers that would have called us freaks, you and I, 2 years ago, to say, hey, what do you mean you want me to introduce AI to my core business processes? You got to be kidding me.
That's happened, right? I remember years ago, people were like, "Why would you
What
even do
planet are
this?"
you on?
Yeah,
What,
and then they're like, "Oh my God, they've been telling
aren't
me
you?
for
Wait,
years." Yeah.
are you the freaks? I mean, like the folks who are telling us that we should transform our core business processes with AI. Yeah, I mean, that obviously feels good to be in the right place at the right time. And I've said to you a number of times since you've been along with me for a couple of these rides, I've never been at the right time in the right place. I've always been so early that who knows if anybody's going to actually, see the point where, and we've actually hit that inflection quite nicely, which is obviously very grateful for. So we have a lot of case study, I guess I could say, to answer your question. And the way we address it is we want our customers to have grandiose plans of exploiting technology in incredible ways. And then we want them to get incredibly tactical and start in a very small, very obvious place. Because what we're really trying to do is a phrase I said just a few minutes ago. We want them to have embracing technology change as a core competency of their business. And they're not going to do that with one massive project, that the moonshot type project that gives them this ridiculous like wow, because it will take way too long, it has way too great a risk, and it is one project. It is not how you would learn any skill in sports, for example. You would not learn to be an incredible baseball player by going to the World Series and trying to hit a grand slam, otherwise you've lost. You would go into the practice field and you'd start throwing a ball and you'd start swinging a bat, and you'd have someone watching and coaching you the entire time, and you would be doing that on a regular basis, and then you'd be playing in minor leagues, making your way up through, finding your way to get an upright. You've got a progression to go on, and you want to go fast, so you better get started, right? So that's really our message. Starting small and having higher velocity is the right answer. It is not, I'm going to make one big bet, I'm going to shoot a load of cash on this one big thing, and I'm going to, or the other thing that a number of people are going to do now that the big tech guys are in this, is they're going to basically say, name your vendor is my strategy. And that will not work. There is
So what do you mean by that? So you said big tech is getting involved. Like who are you talking about? And
I'm
then
talking Microsoft, Salesforce, Oracle, you name your big, the providers of a ton of the software that everybody's already using. Of course, they're going to do really neat things. Some already are doing some fairly neat things, embracing AI into their existing products, which is great. You'd expect no less, right, than any of that. But what customers have to recognize is the motion that they're going through is for the benefit of their own software company. It's not necessarily the strategy that gets them to win in their market. So if 80% of your competitors use the same stack of software that you do, your strategy cannot be to use the same. You're not transformed if all you've done is the same thing that 80% of the companies in your market have done. You are not going to get there. It is certainly not a way to differentiate, is it? And we're not going to, like, I implemented my software better than you did, and that's going to mean anything that you're even going to see at the bottom line? No. What you've got to do is find the outlier way, and that is about agility. And agility isn't about being right, it's about being wrong often enough to get to right. Yeah. So you have the opportunity here to move at a much faster pace than those big tech guys can even deliver new software changes. Those who embrace that are going to be the category definers.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting from a risk perspective. If you wait for the big tech because it's less risky, you're actually introducing your own risk because you're not learning fast enough. But if you do the moonshot, you're like, well, I'm just going to wait and be real conservative and do one big project. That's hugely risky to do it that way. So, I mean, the small iterative process, like you talked about with baseball, like
Develop.
You got to get in the batting cages to hit the ball better. You got to swing a lot of balls.
That's right. And that's right. That's exactly right. It is develop the skill, or as the phrase I was saying a minute ago, develop the core competency. But it is essentially build a muscle at being good at doing that. You're not going to accomplish that if you basically think a vendor is going to come and install it for you. That's not going to develop a skill. And why do I say that? It's not that a vendor coming in and installing a piece of software is a bad thing. It's that your people must be your change agents. They must be the ones who say, we do this in a way that we could transform if we deploy this brand new tech that I couldn't even tell you about right now, but it's going to show up in March, right? And that capability that shows up in March, your people need to be prepared to understand, if I take that capability and I orchestrate it with what we already do, and we have a great human capability in this, and we can match all of that together quickly to show the world a different way or a different thing or a new product, whatever it is, you have now developed the skill that I'm talking about is going to win a World Series. But you're not going to do that if you get vendors coming in, installing stuff and saying, hey, it now does this little thing a little bit better. And if anybody ever studies constraint theory and process blah, 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 which I have, and even though that even having done that, I just characterized it blah, 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 it's really hard to recognize, but optimizing on a task almost never gets you an optimized outcome. You might get lucky and you can see the difference, but you largely cannot. Optimizing at an outcome is going to change your business fundamentally. And when you get to the point where you are now churning that crank again and again and again, and now in multiple areas of the business, and the awareness of what it means to see the way that technology is changing, embrace it in such a way that you can try, fail, get it right, and think, oh my gosh, that's only 3 months after we had the idea. We've had 2 iterations of learning. You can call it failing, but it's the same thing, right? And that's funny because that's always been the philosophy: is you didn't fail, you just learned. Yeah, if you have the capital to continue trying, but if all you did was the project and it failed and you didn't do and you couldn't afford to keep going, that's not learning, that's failing. It's learning when you think that's not going the right direction, let's tweak. That's not the right direction, let's tweak. But when you have the momentum, right? And when other AI projects are already putting money back in the bank, so you're spending house money on the new ideas, you have a basis on which you can accomplish incredibly great things. So maybe all that sounds way too good to be true, but we've got customers that are on their 4th use case with us within 9 months of doing exactly this. So it is not, I'm not talking in theory. I'm not speaking as a, hey, wouldn't it be great if, right? I mean, we've got them. We've got.
Why do you think some companies, like for instance, have done it, 4 different use cases, and they may or may not be playing with house money at this point, hopefully within a year. But, why is it culturally they just took advantage of it? Did somebody have a long enough leash that the executive team, saw it? What do you,
Yeah.
you think there's, obviously you have to start somewhere. What made them get started? Do you think there's a pattern?
Oh, this is a good question, and I'm about to probably break. I will obviously not name names, but I'm probably gonna upset a couple of people, and I do apologize for that. But I'm always one who calls it like I see it, and I just always have thought this is the right way. Executives in driving and alignment with their the middle of the organization, because we actually have customers that don't have the greatest executive push, right, and involvement, or they got involved and said, yeah, you know what, that's a great idea, we should do some AI, and then they haven't shown up to another meeting. Those projects don't, that organization is not developing a core competency in embracing technology at a faster rate than the rest of their market, right? That just does not happen. Nor
The lower and middle parts of the organization see the problem differently.
Yes, potentially. And they see the problem potentially as that whole first effects thing where they think, wait a minute, this is an existential threat to me, and I'm going to basically dig my heels in, and I'm going to make sure the boss doesn't think that that he needs to be or she needs to be in this meeting, and I'm just going to make sure this thing doesn't go very far very fast. This is no time for executives to think, I'll just have the big idea, I'll hand it off to people who take care of it for me. That's not this time. Nor is it time for the middle of an organization to think, I don't really have to listen to the boss, do I? Because that's essentially, we're seeing both sides of this, where there is alignment and there is genuine executive, not just buy-in, but participation. It's flying through the organization, right? And it's and by the way, we get the craziest requests from people when that happens. So one of our customer success guys says, hey, our folks want Krista to generate jokes. Once essentially, Krista to just proactively just offer to tell people jokes and to do a couple of other things. I don't think I've ever heard that stuff before. So I have to investigate this. It's like, okay, where are we? What kind of account is this, right? And what are they doing? And it's, plain old, normal, boring, dry business stuff that these. But how did that happen? Is there's such a swell of I want us to really enjoy this. I want this to be that they're coming up with ideas like that.
Yeah.
And maybe not every company is going to like see that as the way to make sure that engagement happens, but that is an example of I want everybody to know that this is something we all should be embracing, and I want everyone engaged. I want everyone's creative juices flowing. I want everybody to. It's a cool idea. Whether it works or not is practically irrelevant because they have the speed to try it. It does or doesn't work, and they'll do something else, right? It's a time for that, right? And so there's an organization with leadership engagement, middle of the organization, middle management, if you will, alignment, and a lot of momentum. And that organization is going to be a leader in there. They're already doing well, obviously, but they're going to be a leader, and they're going to be the ones that it isn't about, how does this affect us? It's how can we affect it? I mean, they're in a leadership position now. They're going to drive. They're going to define what their type of business does with AI. And I have every expectation they'll be that 2 years out, right? This wasn't a survival thing. This was an opportunity to really like become a leader in our space. It's a great time.
Yeah. So speaking of 2 years out, like what do you think is going to happen next year? Like what are some of your assumptions for next year, for 26, 27, and maybe help someone that, isn't driving that change agent culture, that may give them some ideas, and don't Star Trek me, because it is, I mean, we talk about Star Trek a lot, right? But I mean, like that stuff is really here,
Oh, yeah.
and people don't realize it.
Yeah. You just said don't do that, and then that's what you just stuck in my head and asked me a question. Thank you.
Yeah, because your brain can't not think something, right? I don't know where all the psychology, right? Like, don't think of an elephant, and all you do is think of an elephant. But yeah, don't think of Star Trek. But maybe like let's go back to Star Trek, right? You got I don't know if you have an Enterprise shirt on today.
No, actually, I have one with the 3 Krista icons. Ask people, ask systems, and ask Krista.
So maybe maybe in that light, the Ask Systems, Ask Krista, Ask People, and Star Trek. Like how real is that? Like is it really going to work? And like how would it work? What would it look like?
So yeah, so it'll work. It'll work, and it's no longer a hypothesis. I mean, we do it. In fact, those 3 icons are real, right? The product does. You're asking systems, you're asking people, and you're asking Krista, and asking Krista is actually creating and maintaining AI for you. So I mean that it's absolutely real. It's the whole. It's actually greater than, but we'll accept it for a moment. It's the whole notion of an agentic platform that has the ability to essentially transition a business to running at machine speed, right? Which is a phrase we said back in 2019, and we didn't coin that phrase. I'm sure it's been said before then, but that's the point, is we've been studying what is it going to take for us to operate a business at machine speed, where people are involved by the software asking for their participation, not the other way around. Right now, your business is full of people who use technology when they need help from technology. What we need is technology that accesses people when the technology needs the help. That's what we actually need. And yes, in these handful of use cases within each customer, we're actually getting to that for them, right? Now, that's not obviously enterprise-wide, whether you're talking about a ship or whether you're not talking about a business, it's not enterprise-wide. So I think that what we're really doing is we're going through a couple of years here of how do we actually embrace this? How do we operationalize it, is the old way we used to say it. We describe it today as how do I elegantly orchestrate my people capabilities, my system capabilities and leverage AI capabilities at an ever increasing rate. How do I? And that's, by the way, our peeling the onion. When I say core competency is embracing tech change, that's that first layer of what do you mean by that?
Yeah.
It's exactly what I just said. So I think that we're going to see plenty next year of, man, I shot a lot of cash on AI stuff. I'm not getting any returns. You know who's making money on AI? The people who sold it to me. There's probably plenty that will be the case. And certainly even I have said before, I think the only companies that are actually putting money on the bottom line are Microsoft and a handful of others. And it's actually not who you would think. Oh, of course, you would think Microsoft, I bet. But the others are actually hemorrhaging cash like crazy. They're subsidizing your use of the other LLMs, and because someday they're gonna be able to they're gonna get us all hooked, and then the prices are gonna reflect more of what it actually takes to operate those AI models for us. But at the same time, advancements in GPUs and quantum are going to then change the economy of what it takes to create and maintain AI all over again. So that's why this is not a predictions podcast. There would be no such, only the wise know they are not wise, right? That's what makes them wise. And that's Socrates. I don't claim any ownership to that. But the point of making is we're in a who knows how fast things really will go, and we certainly aren't on a the slope of this line is obviously not constant, right? It is absolutely seeing step function type increases, right? We are suddenly capable of things that we thought, at least I am, we're capable of delivering on things that I would not have predicted at the beginning of this year, that by the end of the year, we are delivering some of the projects we are delivering. Would not have. The ability for us to mix a variety of AI capabilities, classification, regression, and some good LLM tech all together into an orchestrated outcome that delivers on some of the stuff that we do blows my mind. And I'm supposed to be all like, yeah, that's what I thought. That's what I wanted.
Right.
Right?
Right.
No. Some of it I thought I have no idea when we'd be able to get there, but we're getting there.
Yeah. No, it's gonna be interesting, and I mean, the strong will survive, right? So hopefully people, um, hopefully they try, hopefully they fail, and hopefully they learn, right? Because
That's right.
I mean, it has to have you have to have like a continuous learning culture anyway. But if you don't, then I mean, the guy down the road competing with you is gonna
We'll
eat you.
probably have job openings.
Yeah.
Yeah. He'll have job openings. Yep.
Yeah.
And his own, and his or her people, they'll be growing, and they'll be doing interesting things, and they'll be moving within the organization, and their existing knowledge of their business will be leveraged in different ways than it is today, but leveraged, and very important. We've seen that, right? We've seen that in our customer base. It's been interesting to see when someone who used to do the job is now building the Krista assets that do the job, and then making it even more, doing that heavy lifting that, we talk about, the physical aspect of machines have greater physical capabilities, or could have physical capabilities greater than us. The speed aspect of what a machine can do. So you end up in this great world where the people who've probably spent their entire career frustrated, why can't we do it a different way, are now capable of doing it a different way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
And the other half of them are, well, that's the way we've always done it, right? But that's going to phase out, right? But yeah,
will.
I really like, what you were talking about, how people were doing the job and they've been elevated to find like more important work and building the Krista assets. And then, you get them out of the unnecessary details and they're like, oh, we can do this now. And really innovate. So I think that's super interesting and super encouraging for, any type of business, right? Because most businesses, I mean, they're relatively pretty boring, but if if you can make it go faster, then, and keep up with all the tech, That's going to be great. So how,
It's true.
like, what do you do to keep up with tech other than, practically coding, a high percentage of our product? What are some of the things that you do that other people could do, and then we'll kind of close it out from there.
So I would, and I wouldn't use me as the example, and I have a absolutely grateful for terrific development team that makes that statement you just said a significant percentage of our product. Hopefully I make a significant contribution, but I don't think you would actually qualify it as a significant percentage. What I would what
More
I
than
would do.
me.
Okay, greater than zero is significant. Then I got it. Um, the uh, the best I could offer is you don't have to chase every salacious headline, and you don't have to fear that if you're not 90% beyond where you are today, you're in trouble. I just think that you've got to find uh, where you as a leader are aligned with your middle management in places where you can get started and get that iteration going. And you know that you will learn faster if you start faster. And if you will get to that grandiose future that you don't even have to know exactly where it is. Because by the way, in 12 months, there'll be capabilities you can't think of using right now. As a software designer, my whole career, because I've built a number of startups, always trying to invent a category. Every time I had to remind myself, you cannot design software today based on the capacity or capability of computing today. You have to build and design software for what the destination of when you think your market will mature. This is a perfect example of a business I built to do that. If we were building the AI in 2019, the way we do it today, we'd already be out of business. We can afford the compute. But the cost of speed in building and managing models allows us to do things that just a couple of years ago we couldn't possibly be doing. There are unlocks. So you don't have to know your future. You just have to be on a path to it. It can't happen to you because that's where you're going to end up, I think, in your worst shape. So trying to be super practical, it's don't read 6 newsletters a day. Don't believe half of the headlines in those newsletters because they're all they're all trying, just like social media has been doing for a decade now, they're all trying to get your attention at any cost. So when they say things like, most of the doctors aren't finding the cancer in the radiology reports that the AI is, recognize that there's probably a more grounded story there, right? Like we talked about at the very outset. And get really practical. Find ways that you could be 10 times more efficient or 10 times more higher customer sat, or you could free up very important human capital within the company to do better things with that time. Start there, do that project in a very rapid pace in an attempt to figure out how do I do this, not the way that, with all due respect to the company that I talked to a couple of weeks ago, not I'm going to do this one big project and we're now going to be able to claim at parties that we've done an AI project. It's like, no, I want 50 AI projects within the next 4 or 5 months. How do I find a way to know that that's not a terrible idea and I'm going to destroy the company in doing so? I'm going to start one now. I'm going to start learning from that. I'm going to get good at it. And I've got to find a strategy that gets me across the enterprise. I can't go find a point solution, buy it and install it, say I'm now an AI-enabled company, and think that the other 50 projects are any better off for having done that, right?
Yeah.
I've got to find a way that I institutionalize AI adoption for myself, and then I can ask the market to help me get there. And those vendors that actually align to that are the ones I need to be partnered with, and the ones that don't, obviously, aren't going to help me, so I'll need to stay away from those. I just said what is probably a whole lot. And yes, some of it's self-serving. I'll totally grant you, because of course we feel like we're the company that, I shouldn't say we feel. I specifically built us to figure out how can companies adopt technology at a ridiculously faster pace and embrace this AI oncoming unbelievable surge that has actually now happened, and do so in such a way that is zero friction to people, easier on us from a change management perspective. Let's get into the psychology of how do we really embrace change, and how do we get it, and how can we be that right partner. So yes, entirely self-serving, but I also believe it's absolutely correct, right?
Yeah.
You wouldn't want the opposite of what I just said. So I
No.
hope that is an acceptable reason for why I was shamelessly plugging that I'd love to chat with you about what your strategy is and how we can help.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, John. No, it's always insightful to, one, hear your passion, and two, understand and comprehend it, because you're right. The ability to change is the most important thing, right? I mean, otherwise you're just going to wither and die. So
Mhm.
I really appreciate our chat today, and until next time.
Thanks, Scott. And thanks everyone for watching or listening or reading, right? Don't we have a few folks who read. So
Yeah.
hopefully I got all of the constituents.
All right. See you, John.
Bye-bye.